Well, welcome everyone. Um, I'm going to be honest and say that right now there's only myself on the session, which is disappointing, but I think we're probably suffering from Zoom fatigue by now. There's so many people doing what we're doing in terms of trying to help you through this really unusual situation. Anyway, I'm going to record the session for those of you who have signed up, and I'm confident that we'll have joiners as the session continues. So please use the chat box when you join to introduce yourselves. So tell us your name, where you're located, who you work for, and the most important thing that you want to take away from this session. I hope you're all safe and well and somehow making the best of the situation. Now, it's an interactive session, so if there were participants, I would invite you all to unmute your microphones and turn on your cameras, and I'll make that request each time somebody joins. But I'm guessing, and I'm just checking to see if we're still, we do have a participant. Okay, Sue is with us from the US. Sue, thank you for joining. I have started, but so far it's very intimate. It's you and me. So by all means, share your video screen if you wish. We're going to make this very intimate. And please just, for the benefit of others that may join, just let us know in the chat box who you are, where you're located, who you work for, and the most important thing you want to get from this session. Okay, so just a reminder that because we're recording this and it's going to be shared with others who've booked but can't attend, just be mindful of that when you're sharing any information or if you're asking a question. Now, I need to keep a pretty tight rein on the timing. There's only 30 minutes, and that'll go quicker than you know. So when the session is finished, I'll make sure that a recording is available on our YouTube channel, and you'll get a follow-up email with a link to that, plus a copy of the slide deck. And I've actually got a couple of other materials that I'm going to share with you as well in that follow-up email. Okay, now I'm going to disable my video simply because I felt on the last recording it was a bit intrusive and it was actually blocking some of the slides. So I'm just going to hide my video panel. So let's just go into the first slide. Now this is basically just about who I am. This is me when the slide catches up with me. There we go. And my name is Colin Newbold. I head up the TLC online business, and Click 360 is our flagship brand of 360-degree feedback. And this is the 5th of 9 group mentoring sessions. And these are designed to share best practice when it comes to 360-degree feedback implementations. And if you haven't done so already, please use the chat facility to introduce yourselves. And while I encourage you to jump in verbally at any time, with your questions or your observations or suggestions, if you prefer, you can always post into the chat box, which I'll be monitoring from time to time. Now, how I want to work with you on the session is to deliver short bursts of information accompanied by one or more slides, and then just open it up to you guys for questions, comments, observations, suggestions, etc. So take a look at what topics we'll be covering in this session, and then I'll go through them one by one. So let's start by taking a look at the individual 360-degree feedback report in a bit more depth. This is the one that the participant gets. Now, the participant in our speak is the person at the center of the 360. That's the person that the raters are feeding back to. So I'm going to open this up to Sue. Sue, by all means, chip in with your microphone unmuted, and tell us, what do you think should be in the kind of model individual report?
Well, I think it should have a combination of high-level results to give people the overall theme. It should give them an indication of how the different perspectives see them, like different roles, whether it's peers, direct reports, and then also give them some comments or something that can give some context or a little bit more flavor to the numeric ratings. So those are some of the things that I typically look for in an individual report.
Okay. Yeah, I would add to that. I think it's really helpful to start with an index so that people can understand what's in the report, and maybe even a brief description of each of the sections. We have always included a copy of the questionnaire that's used, and we use a numbering system. I'll show you in a second, one of our standard reports, and that helps when it comes to you know, giving some guidance around the detail of the report, and especially if the participant is going to make some notes, or is going to capture a reflection. An index, it just makes it easier. And then we would add, I think, to what you said, the comments that typically start, stop, start and continue. Those are pretty common among different 360 providers in their questionnaire interfaces, and that's obviously something that's valuable in the reporting. We typically would recommend the top strengths and the top, what I call them the top, but actually it's the bottom areas for development. So it's a case of highlights and lowlights, I guess. We would offer that as well. And we throw in a couple of bonus pages on our reports. So let's jump to that. I'm going to try and use the technology to show you a copy of our paper-based report. So let me just bring that up on screen. Okay, so this is our typical, this is an example paper-based report. And if you just scroll down, I'm just going to scroll down here, you'll see there's the index, there's a little explanation about each of the parts. Then there's the questionnaire that was used, and each of those questions, as you can see, is numbered. That's what I meant by the numerical index. Makes referencing easier. And then you've got the summary graphs. And in our reports, we share 3 different types of summary graph. We use the documentation via a bar chart, a table, and also this, which we call a spidergram. So it's just different ways, it's different visual preferences. We then look at the detailed comments, and we typically will have those displayed showing the range. The range is the line underneath that basically indicates how together or how spread apart those perceptions are. And then the comments. Now, this particular one that I'm showing you, the comments were actually disabled. So if I jump to this one, where it's another example report, you've got the detailed graphs here, but then the comments that sit behind that behavior. And so we've got a pretty comprehensive report building here. If you look at the top, you'll see there are 34 pages in this example. But let's just move. I'm just going to jump. I think if I can jump to, in this report, it's probably about, it's probably where I am now, actually. Yeah, here we go. This is the start, stop, continue page. And then we've got the highest and lowest ratings. And then we have the bonus pages, which are the scatter chart, which is based on Johari window. It's quite a useful diagram or graph to help people come to terms with what's in the report. And I've always made the point that if you just show the scatter chart on the basis of each axis being 0 to 100, you're really not going to get much clarity and depth. But if you take the highest score and the lowest score, and you put 2 digits either side of that, and then you magnify the data, you can start to see differences emerging. So that's based on the Johari window model. And then the last bonus page is the comparison. And this is only relevant if there's more than one person going through at the same time. But it allows you, as the participant, to see how you compare to other people in your cohort. So that is the typical layout of one of our reports. And I think it would be fair to say that most organizations show something very similar. Now, the next question, and I'm going to go back to the slide. Let's go back to where we were. The next question actually relates to the paper or digital question, whether it's beneficial to have a paper-based report or a digital report. Now, again, Sue, I think, is still our only contributor, our only participant. So I'm going to open that up to you again, Sue, if you'd like to unmute and just share, what do you feel would be the benefits of paper versus digital, or the other way around?
This one's a tough one because in the past we've always just had the paper version, and so seeing your reports in the digital fashion is the first time that we've looked at that, and I see some distinct advantages to that because I feel like you can make notes right in the report itself, so it ties more closely together. So I really like that aspect. I think with the paper, you have something kind of to take away with you. But I'm sort of leaning towards the digital now that I've seen it. I can see some advantages to that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll show a digital example in a second. I think one of the most important factors that influence the answer is what people are used to. And I think most people are used to paper, and it's typically been what coaches have been used to. And I know that some of the coaches that we work with have actually enjoyed writing in the margins, as it were, on those paper-based reports. They'll get that report before the participant is shown it, and they'll make notes on the back of the previous page, for example. But that is just because they've not been familiar with using the digital reports. They haven't become accustomed to that. So you could argue, well, that's the benefit of the paper-based. You can scribble in the margins or write on the back of the previous page. But some of the drawbacks, I think, are simply that it's bulky to transport, especially if it contains a workbook, or if it doesn't contain a workbook, which obviously fills it up. You've got a separate document to carry around. It's more useful, perhaps, in a face-to-face setting, but it's very difficult to use in a virtual setting. And so much of what I think we're going to be doing in the future will be based on, Zoom type platforms. That I think the paper-based drawback there will begin to surface. And the other thing is it has to be printed, usually in color, and there's a cost to that, and obviously an environmental impact. And the other thing is that I notice a lot of times people come to the meetings and they've left the bloody thing behind, they've filed it away somewhere and they can't remember where they put it. So digital benefits, I think, allows certainly some very sexy, funky features, and I'll show you some of those in a minute. So, for example, you can expand and collapse the pictures on the page. You can magnify very easily. You can incorporate some features. We call them checking out and checking in. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because we have sessions on those coming up. But importantly, I think it can be integrated with the workbook. That's the point you made earlier, Sue. Very interesting the way that can work, and it's all in one It's all in one place, and it's obviously much easier to use in a virtual setting. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. It's very much easier to transport. You could put it onto a memory stick, or you can simply carry it as a favorite somewhere on your browser. And it's more dynamic, because of that. I mean, you can put it on your mobile phone, and you can just check it, whenever. Always available. The only drawback, I think, to digital is the fact that you need an internet connection. We are experimenting with an online app provider. We're looking into that, but it's unlikely that we'll go down that road because of the expense. So for us, it's probably it's the drawback that people do need to have a viable internet connection to use it. Well, let me show you one of the example reports. Let me see if I can bring that up now. Make sure I've got the right page. I think this is the one. This is actually the Zoom page, but it's already loaded up. Here we go. So one advantage, I think, straight away is that the index can be digital. In other words, you can jump to any one of these sections. As an example, if I wanted to go straight to the summary graph, there it is. If you want to look at the whole report, as it were, in sequence, then just scrolling down shows you the same. It's very similar to our paper-based in terms of its layout. Slightly more modern, look and feel to it. You've got the questionnaire again, all indexed, and then you've got the summary graphs. We show them in the same way. We've got the spidergram, we've got the table. There is a bit of a funky thing going on here, and that's one of the advantages of digital, is that we can incorporate what we call strengths and areas for development lines. I don't know if you can see them on the screen, but that's a green line there showing the strengths. Now this line can be preset. Well, by the way, I need to make it clear that these lines do not appear in Click360 Self-Drive. They are not currently enabled. So this only applies if you're buying an enterprise version from us, or if you've got a pay-as-you-go approach. But this line denotes the, I think a good way of describing it is what finish looks like. This is what good performance looks like. This is the standard required, if you like. And we've set this at 75 in this example. So what it means is anybody over that is obviously doing exceptionally well. Whereas the red line that's just visible here, that red line is what we call the development line. And that actually simply means this is about the limit of acceptability, of acceptance. We don't want anyone scoring below that line. That's bad news and really needs to be urgently looked into. And then anything between this, which is typically where the scores end up, then that would be what is where most people sit. Now, interestingly, if you look at the table here, we've used that same denominations to actually characterize whether your score is above or below those lines. So a green score is obviously above the strength line, red scores are below the development line, and the rest are all in amber in the middle. Okay, so that's a digital report example. Here's the detailed analysis, and what I meant by expanding and contracting is this one here. When you're looking at individual questions, you can simply you can collapse them all, which gives you a much quicker summary. This is your score, the rate of average score, and the difference. And if you click the button here, it expands the view, so you can see the detail behind each question. And again, we have the lines here. This is the way we show range. It's important to show range because obviously if you have a very long line, a very broad range, it means that there's a lot of not what's the word I want, the people's perceptions of you are not joined up, they're not in sync. Whereas obviously a very short line like this example here would show that both of those people see you in a very similar way. So one of the things about the range score in the digital is that we can also show standard deviation. Anything over 20%, which is explained here, could be considered significant. Obviously those numbers are well below. So that's how the digital report detail graphs work out. Now, if we look at comments, the comments that we show on digital reports are laid out like this. You've got the two columns, does well, could do differently, and the rate of categories here follow the same colors as used in the bar charts. And it doesn't give you the name of the person, but it certainly shows which category they're sitting in. So anonymity is still protected. Now, if I go straight at this point to the highest and lowest ratings, we can jump straight there with digital. You'll see again that we've got the top 10 and the bottom 10 ratings. And we show the behavior as well as the actual question. If we scroll down, we've got the stop, start, continue page, which we thoroughly recommend in all surveys. It gives people an opportunity, obviously, to say more about any one of the behaviors or competencies that are in the questionnaire, but it also gives people the opportunity to talk about something completely outside of the questionnaire if they feel so inclined. And then right at the bottom here, we've got the scatter chart, which again follows the same thinking, and we have the ability to magnify just by clicking a button here. Let me just see if that works. It sometimes takes a while to catch up, and I'll come back to that, but it's a digital trick. And then here we've got the benchmarking. Unfortunately, in this example, we've only got one person in the survey. We only had one person in the cohort, so there are no comparisons. It's all the same length. Just in case people are wondering what the color coding is, the green score, the dark green score is my self-score, and the pale green score would be the average of everybody else's self-scores for this one behavioral competency. And similarly, the blue line is my manager's score. The slightly lighter shade of blue, that's the average score that my colleagues in that cohort got from their manager. So there's your digital report. But one of the most important things that I haven't shown you yet, I'll come back to. In fact, I'm going to jump to the first page of the detailed analysis. And I'm going to come back to that when I've talked about, let's just get back there, there we go. I'm going to talk about these big blue buttons in just a second. So let's go back to the slideshow, and let me just pick up on the workbook concept. Okay, so if we move to the next slide, these are the reasons why it's important to have a workbook. We would always recommend a workbook, even if people are buying the paper-based, because the paper-based workbook can be used in the same way that the digital one is. It's just not integrated. So here are the reasons why. Number one, it leads the participant through the report. In other words, you can put into the workbook a guide, which aids interpretation. You can also use the workbook to ask insightful questions of the participant, and that would aid the coach if there was a coaching relationship there. And it also would allow for the reflections of the participant, the answers, if you like, to those questions to be written into the workbook. Also allows the building of an action plan. That is one of the fundamental features of a workbook. And again, I can share, I think I can do this. I've got one here that this is a paper-based example, but this is actually converted into page turning software. And if you see how that works, this is the paper-based workbook example. But it's not many pages, only 13 pages, but it guides the participant and the coach, if they have a coaching relationship around the report, it guides them through the interpretation of that report. But let's go back and jump on to the digital report example, because Sue was talking about this earlier on. We've been able to incorporate the workbook we've integrated it with the digital report. So this allows for, sorry, I've got a box here, it's a chat box. I'm just going to, you can't see that, but I've just disabled it. So it was blocking my view of the workbook. Okay, so you've got the workbook in here. And just something to tell you, obviously this, what we're looking at right now is a laptop. You're being shown this slide on a laptop. If this was a big PC with a bigger screen, you would see a bigger workbook. It would take 50% of the space available. If you're looking at this on a mobile phone, for example, then the workbook would sit either in front of or behind the report page. So you would toggle between the two pages. But the idea is that within the workbook, there are various guides and questions that allow the participant to then type their answers into these spaces here. So the workbook can be integrated in the digital report, making it all retained in one place. And you'll see that our workbook follows a flowchart here. This tells you exactly where you are. It also tells you which pages of the report it refers to and so on. So if I just close that for a second and then go down to the scatter chart page as an example, let's see if that's opened up by now. No, it still hasn't. Okay, we may have a glitch on my sample here. I'll go one more time. No, I don't think that's going to work. I think we've got a glitch, but it doesn't matter, because if I wanted to show you the workbook, it opens up here at a different place. And this, again, explains how to analyze or interpret the scatter chart, and more importantly, asks you questions about each of these boxes. What is the data telling you? And that's where the information is being stored, the response. And one other thing that we have integrated into the digital report is it's a basic planning guide. It's the action planning guide. So this would be anything that's typed in blue is the participant's own self-reflections, possibly prompted by the coach. The red example here is simply just showing how to use the boxes. So that's a really important piece. And one other thing that I'll explain now, it's linked. This piece is linked to the electronic automated checking out and checking in functions, which we're going to cover on a follow-up session. So there you go. There's the digital report example with integrated workbook. So let me come back. I'm going to stop at that point just quickly. I can see the time is marching on, but I'm just quickly going to check in. I think we still only have Sue with us. Sue, do you have any questions or suggestions or observations up to this point?
I just had one question, is that when do they receive the report? Is that something that they receive prior to a coaching session and they review it and do the workbook before the coaching, or do they see it in the moment when they're meeting with a coach, or what's the best practice as to when they get the report?
It's interesting one. We always leave it to the coach to decide. So this is if a coach has been assigned to the participant. We recommend to the coach that they give the report to the person before the session starts, but not very long before, possibly 2 to 3 hours. And in so doing, they actually should explain to the participant. So for example, if they include the link in an email, they would say above the link, by all means, open it up and have a look. Don't go into any depth. By all means, just skim through it. The whole point of the coaching session is for me to help you understand the key messages. And also, obviously, they wouldn't say this in the email, but it's all about managing the person's reaction to those messages. So yeah, if you leave it with them for too long, they will focus on all the negatives typically, and a lot of the richness will be lost. So that would be my response to you.
Okay. And one other question is, can the report, the digital report, be downloaded by someone, or does it sit out there that's where they have to access it?
Okay, so it's a web-based URL, so they can certainly save that URL as a favorite. In other words, once they've opened it up, they can save it as a favorite on their browser. But this is why you need an internet connection, because at the moment it only works by actually connecting to the internet and then bringing it down to your browser. Even if you've saved it as a favorite, that's still going to be the same process.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Having said that, we've had questions about printing the digital report. Of course, it is possible. You probably saw on the example I just showed, there is an icon to print both the report and the workbook. Although, to us, it kind of defeats the object because you're immediately losing some of the benefits. Okay.
Yeah.
In the closing minutes, I'd just like to very quickly cover organizational reports. That's what we promised to include. And I think it's really important to remember that this really only, really applies. It only has relevance, if you like, where several individuals, or better still, several cohorts of individuals are going through 360 over a significant amount of time. And I also need to point out that at this moment in time, organizational reporting is not available on the self-drive application. But where it is enabled on our enterprise apps and on our pay-as-you-go service, the data will be going into one or more databases, and therefore the data can be mined to show organization-wide reporting, such as the ones shown here. Now, these are the most popular reports. These are available in the enterprise. They're delivered, if you like, included in any enterprise applications like your own, Sue. You have one of our enterprise applications. But this list is not the only list of reports that the company produces. We also have, and I'll show you this by sharing another screen. So let me just bring this in. Find the right screen. I think it's on this one. Let me jump to it now. I think this is it. Yeah, there we go. I don't know how clear that is on the screen, but that is the total list. It's 21 different reports that are available to our enterprise customers and on a pay-as-you-go basis. And you'll see that the ones that were on the previous slide were actually shown here in green, but it's a very comprehensive menu of OI reports. And what I thought I'd do, especially as we're running out of time, is I'll make sure that this document is included with the follow-up email, because it also does reveal some examples of these reports. So I'll make sure you've got a copy of that. But yeah, it's really interesting if you want to cut the data organizationally. Okay, well, that's pretty much all I intended to cover in this whistle-stop tour. Let me go back to the slide deck, which I think is this one, and share that with you again. Am I in the right place? Let me see if that's the right one. Yeah, no. I'm just getting my head around this technology. There we go. Let's just go back to the slide. So what I wanted to show you, actually, that's still not the slide, is it? It's tricking me. I'm going to go back and do it this way. Right, let's do that. I'm going to share that again now. There we go. Okay, you should see the slide deck again. All I want to do is actually just conclude with the final slide, and that's our next session, which if I go back here, there we go. Our final slide is just a reminder of our next session. So I've mentioned in a previous session, I think it was the one last week, that we recommend 2 feedback coaching sessions. So next week's group mentoring session simply deals with the first of those coaching sessions. The main focus of that session is going to be for you to understand how we take a participant through that report. So we'll go back in and use the digital report in that session. And Our purpose is obviously to help the participant understand the key messages coming out of their report, starting with strengths and obviously following up with the areas for development. We'll also look at how you might manage reactions to those messages. So to book on that session or any of the future sessions, we've still got 4 to come. Please click on the link shown in this slide. Remember, you'll get a copy of this slide deck as a follow-up. And thank you to Sue. I think, Sue, you were our only participant. Do appreciate it. And
Thank you, Colin.
thank you. As well as the slide deck, I'll make sure you get a link to the recording and also the other document that I promised. Please follow the slightly more relaxed rules, or certainly in the UK. And above all, stay safe, stay well. Bye for now.